Have you ever felt the silence that follows a rejection? It isn't just the absence of words. It's a silence that echoes inside your chest, as if the world suddenly shrinks around you. Maybe it was a date you hoped would turn into something more, only to be told, "I don't feel the same way." Maybe it was the email you waited on for weeks, the one that came back with the sterile subject line, "We've decided to move forward with other candidates." Or maybe it was a friend, a parent, a community that made you feel as if you didn't belong. Whatever form it takes, rejection has a way of piercing through us, leaving not only disappointment, but a quiet question: am I enough? In America, where we're taught to chase success, relationships, and recognition with relentless energy, rejection often feels like failure. A missed job offer feels like a verdict on your ability. A broken relationship feels like proof of unworthiness. Even a lack of likes on social media can feel like a silent dismissal. It's no wonder rejection is one of the most feared experiences. We've tied it to our identity. And yet, the irony is that rejection is as common as breathing. You cannot live, you cannot love, you cannot grow without tasting it. Which means this fear is not only universal, it's inevitable. The question is not whether rejection will come, but how you will meet it. This is where the ancient Stoics whisper across centuries, offering us an antidote. They knew rejection in its harshest forms: exile, betrayal, public humiliation. And still, they found a way not only to endure it, but to rise through it. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor philosopher, once reminded himself, "If someone despises me, that's their affair. My only concern is not to do or say anything worthy of contempt." Epictetus, born a slave, knew rejection at every turn, yet taught that our true power lies not in what happens to us, but in how we interpret it. Their wisdom is not about avoiding rejection, but about transforming it from a wound into a teacher, from a barrier into a doorway. Today, we'll explore how to conquer the fear of rejection with Stoic strategies, not through cold theory, but through living truths that can carry you through the sting of being turned away and into the strength of standing firm. If you've ever felt diminished by rejection, this journey will show you how to reclaim your power, your dignity, and your peace. If you're ready to stop fearing rejection and start using it as fuel, stay with me. And if this message resonates, I invite you to like this video, subscribe to Stoic now, and walk with us through this timeless wisdom. Number 1. The hidden weight of rejection. Rejection hurts not just because it denies us something we want, but because it touches the most vulnerable part of our humanity, the desire to belong, to be valued, to matter in the eyes of others. In America, where much of life is measured by achievement and recognition, the weight of rejection can feel even heavier. A promotion denied can cast doubt on years of effort. A failed pitch in a business meeting can feel like proof that your ideas are unworthy. Even something as ordinary as being ignored in a group conversation can stir that old, familiar ache that whispers, "You are invisible." Psychologists have found that rejection lights up the same areas of the brain as physical pain. That's not just metaphor, it's biology. The sting of being told no or being brushed aside is processed in the same neural circuits that respond when you burn your hand on a stove. No wonder rejection lingers long after the moment passes. It explains why your heart still races when you recall that time in high school you weren't invited to sit at the lunch table, or why your stomach sinks when a romantic interest ghosts you without explanation. The body remembers, and the mind interprets that pain as something more. Not just "they said no," but "I am not enough." This is where the stakes rise. Because when rejection is left unchecked, it does more than bruise the ego. It begins to shape the way we live. Some people stop trying altogether. They never apply for the job they want because one rejection taught them it's safer not to hope. Others guard their hearts, never reaching out in love because the memory of being turned down still burns. Still others bury themselves in constant performance, overworking, overachieving, overcompensating, all to avoid the possibility of being seen as less. In each case, rejection is not just an event, it becomes a prison. A prison built not of locked doors, but of invisible walls around the soul. American culture doesn't make this easier. We live in a society where validation is counted in numbers, followers, likes, views, performance reviews, dollars earned. Social media has turned approval into currency, and silence into a verdict. When you post a photo and no one responds, the rejection feels real even though no one said a word. When you're swiped left on a dating app, your worth feels diminished even though you never met the person. Every ignored text, every failed sale, every unanswered application becomes more than a moment. It becomes evidence against your value. This is the danger, the subtle accumulation of rejection that convinces you to shrink, to settle, to stop daring. And yet, if you pause and look deeper, rejection carries another truth. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If someone does not value you, let that be their affair. Your duty is to remain true to yourself." What the Stoics remind us is that rejection does not define reality, it defines perception. Someone else's no is not a verdict on your worth, but a reflection of their perspective, their needs, their limitations. To fear rejection is to hand your power to another person's opinion, as if they are the keeper of your value. But the Stoic insists, your value is yours alone, rooted in your character, your actions, your virtue, not in the applause or silence of the crowd. Think of the cost if this fear is never addressed. Imagine the musician who never shares her songs again because an audience once booed her. Imagine the entrepreneur who buries his idea because one investor shook his head. Imagine the father who stops telling his children, "I love you," because those words were once rejected by someone he trusted. In each case, rejection silences not just a voice, but a life. That is why this topic matters. Because unchecked rejection is not a small discomfort. It is a thief that robs us of courage, love, and presence. But there is another path. The very fact that rejection stings means it has something to teach us. It forces us to face the truth of what we cannot control. It reminds us that we cannot force affection, nor dictate opportunities, nor demand acceptance. And this realization, while painful, is liberating. For if rejection lies beyond our control, then our freedom lies in how we respond to it. The Stoics knew this secret well. To fear rejection is to live in chains, but to accept rejection as part of life is to live in freedom. And so, the stakes are clear. Rejection will happen to you again, whether tomorrow, next month, or years from now. The only question is whether you will let it define you, or whether you will meet it with the strength of those who came before, who saw rejection not as an end, but as a beginning. Number 2. The ancient voices that refuse to fade. When most people search for advice on handling rejection, they turn to modern self-help books, motivational speakers, or quick lists on the internet. The language is familiar. Don't take it personally. Keep trying. Stay positive. And while those words sound good, they often crumble the moment rejection pierces the heart. What you need in that moment is not a slogan. It's an anchor. Something deep enough to hold you steady when the storm of disappointment comes. And that anchor, surprisingly, was forged nearly 2,000 years ago by men who lived lives far harsher than ours, and yet discovered a way to remain unbroken. The Stoics are not simply marble statues frozen in museums, nor dry passages tucked inside dusty philosophy books. They were real men who walked through rejection in its rawest forms. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful emperors in Roman history, lived surrounded by critics and betrayals. Imagine leading a vast empire where every decision was met with disapproval by someone. The Senate rejected his ideas, generals doubted his orders, enemies plotted against him. And yet, in his private writings, what we now call meditations, he reminded himself, if someone rejects you, it is their impression, not your worth. He refused to let the judgments of others stain his soul. Then there was Epictetus, born into slavery, rejected not just by individuals, but by an entire system that considered him property. He endured humiliation most of us cannot fathom. Yet from that rejection came wisdom. It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them. Epictetus understood that no matter how many doors were slammed in his face, the true battleground was not out there, but in here, in the mind. By mastering his interpretation, he found a freedom no rejection could take away. And Seneca, advisor to emperors, playwright, and thinker, knew rejection in the most intimate form. Cast into exile by political enemies, stripped of honor, accused of crimes he did not commit, he discovered that external rejection could not touch the inner fortress of a disciplined mind. His letters echo with resilience. If you live in harmony with nature, you will never be poor. If you live according to what others think, you will never be rich. Seneca's rejection became not a curse, but a stage for him to test the very philosophy he taught. Why does this matter to you? Here, now, in a world filled with dating apps, LinkedIn rejections, and the unspoken judgments of social media. Because the Stoics remind us that rejection is not new. The sting you feel today has been felt in palaces and slave quarters, in exile and in the battlefield. And those who came before discovered something timeless. Rejection does not have to define you. In fact, it can refine you. Imagine you've just been ghosted after pouring your heart into someone. The immediate instinct is to spiral. I'm not lovable. I'm not worthy. But Marcus Aurelius whispers, the rejection is theirs, not yours. Their silence speaks of their state of mind, their needs, their blindness, not your value. Or think of the job interview that ended with the dreaded line, we've decided to move forward with other candidates. Epictetus would remind you, the event itself is neutral. It is your interpretation that turns it into poison or fuel. If you treat it as feedback, it becomes a stepping stone. If you treat it as proof of failure, it becomes a chain. This is the twist most people don't expect. You came searching for ways to numb the pain of rejection, but the Stoics don't offer numbing. They offer transformation. They don't promise that rejection won't hurt. They promise that it won't have the final word. They hand you the tools to shift your gaze, to see rejection not as a verdict, but as a mirror reflecting something deeper about life. That you cannot control the choices of others, only the steadiness of your own soul. This is where the journey turns. Up until now, we've talked about the pain of rejection, the way it bruises and restricts. But with the Stoics as guides, the horizon widens. Suddenly, rejection is not the enemy, but the teacher. Not the end, but the doorway. And when you walk through that doorway, you discover strategies that don't just help you survive rejection, they help you grow stronger from it. And that is where we go next. Because Marcus, Epictetus, and Seneca didn't just speak in lofty phrases. They left behind practical strategies, clear, usable tools that you can carry into your next rejection, whether it comes from a date, a boss, a friend, or the world itself. These strategies are the heart of Stoic practice. And once you understand them, rejection will never hold the same power over you again. Number 3, turning rejection into strength. It is one thing to hear philosophy and another to live it. The Stoics were never content with words alone. They believed philosophy must be practical, like medicine for the soul. Rejection, then, is not an abstract idea to them. It is the wound they treated again and again, a wound you and I still carry. And so they gave us strategies, not to avoid rejection, but to transform it into strength. The first is to reframe the meaning of rejection. Most of us instinctively see rejection as failure. Didn't get the job? You weren't good enough. Didn't get the date? You weren't attractive enough. But the Stoics invite us to step outside that frame. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been. The rejection itself is not the harm. It is the story you attach to it. When a hiring manager says no, what if it isn't evidence of your inadequacy, but evidence of their needs? What if the person who turned you down wasn't rejecting your worth, but revealing their own preference, or even their own blindness? To reframe rejection is to remember that someone else's no says more about them than it does about you. The second is to detach from the outcome. Epictetus taught that peace comes from focusing only on what is within your control. You can choose to ask. You can choose to show up. You can choose to give your best. But the answer, the applause, the approval, that belongs to others. If your worth is chained to outcomes you cannot control, you will always live at the mercy of other people's moods. But if your worth is grounded in your effort, your integrity, your courage to act, then no rejection can take it from you. Imagine standing before someone you admire, confessing your feelings. They smile gently and say, I don't feel the same. In that moment, the outcome is not yours. But the courage it took to speak, that is yours forever. The act itself is victory. The third strategy is perhaps the most uncomfortable, but also the most powerful. Practice voluntary rejection. Seek out small rejections on purpose, not to humiliate yourself, but to build resilience. The modern entrepreneur Jia Jiang made this famous through his 100 Days of Rejection challenge, where he intentionally asked for outrageous things: a free burger refill, a tour of a stranger's backyard, a haircut at McDonald's. Most of the time, he was told no. Sometimes, surprisingly, he was told yes. But more importantly, he discovered that rejection loses its power when you expose yourself to it regularly. The Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, the practice of anticipating discomfort to make yourself stronger. Ordering a coffee and asking for a discount, starting a conversation with someone who may not respond, submitting your ideas even if they may be ignored. Each small act is a training ground for the larger rejections of life. The fourth strategy is the deepest: anchor yourself in inner worth. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." To crave acceptance is to live in poverty of the soul. But when you recognize that your value lies not in their approval, but in your virtue, your honesty, your courage, your kindness, you become unshakable. Imagine a tree in the middle of a storm. The winds rage, branches bend, leaves scatter, but the roots, deep and unseen, hold the tree upright. Your inner worth is those roots. Rejection may bend you, shake you, strip you of what is external, but it cannot uproot you if you know who you are. Together, these strategies form a new way of meeting rejection, not as a wound, but as a teacher, not as the end of something, but as the beginning of strength. Think of the next time you are ghosted after a date. Instead of spiraling into "what's wrong with me," you could respond with the calm of Marcus. Their choice speaks of their state, not my worth. Think of the next time your boss overlooks your idea. Instead of retreating into silence, you could remember Epictetus. You control only your effort, not their approval. Think of the next time you hesitate to try because you fear being told no. You could step forward anyway, practicing small doses of rejection until the fear dissolves. This is the climax of our journey. The fear of rejection no longer has to command your life. The Stoics do not erase the sting. They teach you how to carry it with dignity. They remind you that rejection is not the end of your story, but the sharpening of your character. Each no you encounter can become the whetstone that strengthens your will, if only you choose to see it that way. And so the question is not, will you be rejected? You will. The question is, what will you do with it? Will you let it shrink you? Or will you let it shape you into someone who is calm, resilient, and unbreakable? The Stoics have shown us the path. All that remains is for you to walk it. Number 4, the quiet power after the storm. Rejection is no longer the shadow it once was. By now, you've seen it for what it truly is. Not a verdict, not a sentence, not a scarlet mark on your worth, but a moment, a mirror, a test. It comes and goes, like weather, and you remain. This is the great liberation of Stoic wisdom. You are not at the mercy of rejection because you were never defined by it to begin with. Think of the last time rejection silenced you. Maybe you didn't sing because someone once mocked your voice. Maybe you didn't apply for the promotion because another door had slammed in your face before. Maybe you didn't confess your feelings because the memory of "I don't see you that way" still lingers in your chest. All those moments looked like protection, but they were cages. What the Stoics remind us is that rejection does not belong in the category of disaster. It belongs in the category of life. And when you accept this, the fear loosens its grip. Marcus Aurelius often wrote to himself in the middle of battles and betrayals, "If it is endurable, then endure it." Stop complaining. Rejection is endurable, not pleasant, not painless, but bearable. And within that endurance lies a gift. Each rejection strengthens your tolerance, sharpens your clarity, and clears the noise of false expectations. It teaches you, over and over again, that what is yours cannot be taken, and what is taken was never truly yours. In a culture that prizes applause, likes, and validation, this way of living is radical. Imagine walking into a meeting and speaking your truth without trembling over whether they'll nod in agreement. Imagine confessing love not as a gamble for validation, but as an act of courage, a statement of who you are. Imagine sharing your art, your work, your ideas, not because they will be accepted, but because expressing them is part of your integrity. That is freedom. That is what the Stoics called living in accordance with nature, acting with virtue, and letting the world respond as it will. Of course, the sting will still come. Rejection will still knock on your door. But the difference now is this: it will not own you. You will feel the pain, yes, but you will also feel the ground beneath your feet. You will remember Epictetus whispering, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." You will remember Seneca urging, "He suffers more than necessary, who suffers before it is necessary." And you will remember that every no is just one more thread in the larger tapestry of your life, a pattern that often only makes sense when seen from a distance. This video is not about pretending rejection is easy. It's about reclaiming the quiet power to face it with calm. Every small shift you make, reframing the meaning, detaching from the outcome, practicing discomfort, rooting yourself in inner worth, is a step toward freedom. And freedom, once tasted, changes everything. So now I turn the question to you. What is the rejection you've been carrying? Was it a relationship, a job, a friendship, a dream? And what would it mean for you to lay it down, not as a wound, but as a weight you no longer need to bear? I invite you to share your story in the comments. Not as confession, not as weakness, but as a mark of courage. You may find that someone else's rejection looks like your own, and that in sharing, you both grow stronger. If this journey has touched you, if you found even a spark of strength in these words, I invite you to like this video and subscribe to Stoic now. Not as a transaction, but as an act of community. This channel exists to remind you, week after week, that you are not alone in your battles, and that the wisdom of ages still speaks into your life today. And so we close where we began, with rejection. It will come again, in ways you cannot predict. But when it does, I want you to remember one simple truth. Rejection is not the enemy. Fear is. And fear only has power when you hand it your voice. Stand firm. Speak. Dare. Live. Because in the end, the world may tell you no 100 times, but your soul still holds the right to say yes to life. And that is the only acceptance you will ever need.